Ahoy mateys! Captain Eric here. Welcome aboard. A few weeks ago, publisher Game Mill Entertainment officially unveiled to the world Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, a brand new fighting game that pits all of your favorite Nickelodeon characters against one another. Now, when looking at this kind of fighter, most would think of the peak of the subgenre, Super Smash Bros., an absolutely beloved Nintendo series that originally pitted together Nintendo icons like Mario and Pikachu against each other, but would later feature other video game icons like Sonic the Hedgehog and Pac-Man in a multitude of different kinds of match types. The fifth and latest game in the Super Smash Bros. Series, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, released back in 2018 for the Nintendo Switch. And look, they didn't just slap that Ultimate title on for no reason. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, for the first time ever, features every single fighter that has ever tussled on a Final Destination platform. 74 base characters at launch. That is an impressive roster for a fighting game. Most developers would simply shy away from the comparisons to Super Smash Bros., but given some of the talent and statements that have been from the development team, Ludosity and Fairplay Labs, it seems fair to say that they are not shying away from their inspiration. And from the moment of announcement, the thoughts in my head of the possible fighters to come out of the Nickelodeon canon has simply been non-stop. So given the same parameters of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, what would the Nickelodeon All-Star version of that look like? Only giving myself about a week's time, I came up with my own dream roster of what Nickelodeon All-Star Ultimate would look like. A few caveats before we start. First and foremost, this is my own opinion on this roster. I do not expect that these 74 fighters are going to wind up exactly as your 74 fighters. So don't take this too seriously, and if you have any moves that you would make, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear any roster additions or changes you would make on your own, and even just post your rosters below if you'd like. Secondly, as I was coming up with fighters for this roster, I was left with a bunch of characters that wouldn't necessarily make fighters given these parameters, but I wanted them to be featured in the game somehow, and I think I found a way for that to happen. Now, I am taking inspiration directly from an item in the Super Smash Bros. Series known as an assist trophy. Like a Pokeball, when you throw an assist trophy, a random character from a random video game series will pop out and assist you in some way, shape, or form. Now, this is a very popular item, and it has even led to certain assist trophies being upgraded to fighters in later games, like Little Mack. So don't be offended if a character you love has found its way into the assist column. It could absolutely be swapped out. Lastly, due to the possible long length of this series, I may end up releasing it in 3 different parts. Part 1, focusing on the characters from the 90s, Part 2, focusing on the characters from the 2000s, and Part 3, focusing on the characters of the 2010s. I will be showing off my roster in order of appearance, and by the show's premiere date. Some of the characters featured premiered earlier on Nickelodeon than their show's official premiere date, but I'm going by that official premiere date for this roster. By all means, I anticipate that I've made a mistake here somewhere, so just let me know in the comments below and I will take my humble lashings. Lastly, due to the possible long length of this series, I will be releasing it in 3 parts. Part 1 covering the characters from the 90s, Part 2 covering the characters from the 2000s, and Part 3 covering the characters from the 2010s. We got this, baby! Alright. Additionally, as I was coming up with these characters and writing down assists, I was also finding myself writing down some levels and then assists and levels based off of shows that don't even have fighters represented on my roster. I will keep any of those additional assists or levels that don't have any fighters represented at the end of the series, just as an extra little sweet deal for you in case you like some really deep-cut Nickelodeon knowledge. And if this is the kind of content you'd like to see, please let me know, as I would love to break down almost each and every show I cover on this series, to see what kind of elements we can pull from for a fighting game. Without further ado, let's start all the way back in 1989. I know that I mentioned that we were covering characters from the 90s in this part, but to be fair, this character does have his beginnings in 1989, but most of his Nickelodeon career is actually from the 90s, so it technically counts. Back in 1989, Nickelodeon began airing a few shorts called The Adventures of Pete and Pete in between commercial breaks. These were about a minute long, and they featured 2 brothers, Pete and Pete, their eccentric neighbors, friends, and family in their suburban life in Wellsville. The shorts proved to be popular, so in 1991, 5 half-hour specials based off the adventures of Pete and Pete aired on Nickelodeon, and a full-fledged 3-season series began airing in 1993, ending in 1996. The Adventures of Pete and Pete was created by Will McRobb and Chris Viscardi. and stars Michael Morona and Danny Tamborelli as the titular Pete and Pete. Ladies and gentlemen, the very first fighter in my roster of Nickelodeon All-Star Ultimate is none other
Archie, the strongest man in the world.
For those that have never watched The Adventures of Pete and Pete, this may seem like a left field choice of a character, but by all means, you need to watch that show for yourself. In my opinion, for what I believe what it means to be Nickelodeon, it's the most Nickelodeon live-action show that exists. It's a very surreal fever dream of a show. It's not your typical sitcom. What might appear like a guy running around the town in very tight pajamas is someone who seems to have powers in this world of some regard. As far as I know, he's Nickelodeon's very first superhero, and I'm going to be honest off the bat right now, my list is going to be a little superhero heavy. I just want to see a lot of these characters duke it out, and Artie, the strongest man in the world, deserves to be among the other Nickelodeon characters fighting for supremacy. Now, I'm only assuming that live-action characters are on the docket for possibilities, since in Game Mill Entertainment's previous Nickelodeon release, Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix, one of the racers available was JoJo Siwa, and JoJo Siwa is not a cartoon character. So I only have to imagine that to use a cartoony likeness of some of these characters, they would just have to get permission from their actors. Toby Huss, I'm sure, would have no problem digitizing Artie, the strongest man in the world, to duke it out with the other Nickelodeon characters. As far as his moveset, I honestly think about the Mii Brawlers from Super Smash Bros. Just a very generic brawling type character, one that could pull a ton of references from the show, and once again, if you haven't watched The Adventures of Pete and Pete, do yourself a favor and track down a way to watch it, because for some reason it's not available on Paramount Plus right now. It's not available on any streaming service, and this is a bit of an injustice because the world needs to understand the brilliance of Artie, the strongest man in the world.
For I am Archie, the strongest man.
The next show really doesn't need a big introduction, but I'm going to give it one anyway because this is a show that helped put Nickelodeon on the map. It was my favorite show as a child. I'm sure a lot of you watching have fond memories of watching this throughout the 90s, the 2000s, and even with your kids in the 2020s. It's a timeless show that lives on from generation to generation. It is a Nickelodeon staple. It's a show that's so legendary that it has its own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about the one, the only, Rugrats, created by Arlene Klasky, Gabar Chupo, and Paul Germain. Celebrating its 30th anniversary, Rugrats premiered on August 11th, 1991, and it is among the greatest television shows in the history of television. Now, when you narrow that down to television animation, why, you're talking about the cream of the crop. And let me just say, while the Rugrats are celebrating their 30th anniversary this year, I celebrated mine last year, and rewatching the show at my age, it is aged like fine wine. If you are an adult and you just have fond memories of watching Rugrats, go and watch that first season. Let me tell you, it goes places that you might not remember, and it explores topics that as an adult really hits home now. The one thing I've always said is that the Rugrats crawled so that SpongeBob could jog. Because, like it or not, the second SpongeBob came on the scene and became a cultural phenomenon, it kind of overshadowed Rugrats, and it let them bow out gracefully, even if it still lived on for years after its television finale. Now, when it comes to fighters from Rugrats, you're dealing with a lot of babies and toddlers, and usually the first character to come to mind when it comes to any sort of violence in Rugrats is, of course, Reptar.
Halt!
And Reptar himself is more of an icon of the 90s, superseding Rugrats as a brand. It's one of the main characters that you see representing Nickelodeon and 90s Nickelodeon. I have seen a ton of 90s Nickelodeon merchandise that'll use only a few characters, and sometimes the only Rugrats representation will be Reptar. I mean, to give the lizard his due, if you had to take one 90s Nickelodeon character, boil it down to one character that represents the whole 90s, even though SpongeBob is in there at 1999 and really counts, if we just ignore that, It comes down to Reptar. The whole size thing about Reptar really doesn't matter because even Reptar's size fluctuates on the Rugrats show. I mean, he's usually depicted as a toy, and even in his movies, sometimes he's towering buildings in what seems to be New York. Other times, he's a little bit smaller and dealing with smaller issues, and then sometimes it's a guy in a lizard suit. And look, honestly, that's the way I see him in this game, is just a dude in a really good Reptar cosplay. It's really cool to have Reptar as a fighter already announced in the actual game, but here, of course, Reptar is my first choice as a fighter. But when it comes to other choices, it really boils down to obviously 3 other characters: Tommy, Chucky, and Angelica. Each of them could have varying movesets that could pull references from the show in so many different deep-cut ways. But honestly, through an argument with my coworker, I was doubting myself in the idea that toddlers could square up with some of these other characters. Now, I'm totally for it. These 3 as fighters could absolutely work, and nobody would think differently. I do have Nickelodeon Super Brawl Universe installed in my phone, which is more of a 2D fighter with these characters, and Tommy and Angelica are both fighters in the game, so it isn't out of the realm of possibility that these characters could square up with the other Nicktoons. But during this discussion, I looked over at the Super Smash Bros. Roster to show off that there are characters that are a bit younger that can square off against these super dangerous villains from all these video games. During this discussion is when I brought up Bowser Jr., a character from the Super Mario series who is a bit on the younger end, but still has no problem squaring up against Ganondorf or Sephiroth. Bowser Jr. also uses the Clown Car, which uses a multitude of different weaponry to attack the other characters. He also has 7 alternate costumes that take the form of the Koopalings: Larry, Morton, Wendy, Iggy, Roy, Lemmy, and Ludwig von Koopa. It's a very simple and easy way to get a bunch of characters in the game. It's one fighter, but a bunch of different palette swaps. I'm sure talking about all of this makes it pretty obvious that I'm going to make the second fighter chosen from Rugrats the Reptar Wagon.
This is the Reptar Wagon. The ultimate in toddler transportation. The perfect children's toy.
Or a variation of the Reptar Wagon.
I am Reptar! Hear me roar!
I imagine a more compact single rider version of the Reptar Wagon that also utilizes a few other Stu Pickle inventions in its weaponry. Who happens to be driving this Reptar Wagon? One of 8 of the Rugrats. That's right. I found an incredibly simple way to get all of the Rugrats in here, because originally I did have Tommy, Chucky, Angelica penciled in. I had Phil and Lil penciled in as an assist, throwing mud all over the screen, covering it up, making it hard to see the fight. Then I pictured Dill coming through with the Reptar Wagon, running people over. And then I was finding ways to shoe in Kimmy and Susie. And then I felt bad. I was like, well, people are fans of these characters. Why not? Why couldn't they be fighters as well? Of course, plugging up the roster with all 8 of these characters, while doable, would then just take away other spots for other Nicktoons. So here's a very simple way to have one fighter developed, but all 8 Rugrats represented in the game. So you don't have to worry about your favorite Rugrat not being represented. I know even the possibility of Phil and Lil being a Ice Climbers type team would make sense as well, but in some regard, unless you're going to make a separate moveset for all 8 of these characters, or at least the 7 of them with Phil and Lil as a grouping, you're going to leave someone out. You could make Susie a alternate costume swap for Angelica. Then what do you do for Kimmy? Do you make her an alternate costume for Chucky? But then is Dill another moveset? And then there you go. You could compact it and do whatever you'd like, but I found that this was the best way to work in the roster I was creating. So my choices are Reptar and the Reptar Wagon being controlled by one of the 8 Rugrats. So when it came to assist characters, I really didn't want to go overboard. I was thinking of the obvious ones, because the first obvious one when you have all of these characters lined up is, of course, Spike. Now, Spike has a storied history of saving the babies anytime they've been in any significant danger, so he makes an obvious choice for a character to show up. But another character I would love to see as an assist is, of course, Grandpa Lou. Grandpa Lou is my favorite Rugrats character by far. He has been making me laugh since I was a kid, but the funniest thing about him is that he literally can fall asleep at any point in time. And if you're a fan of the Super Smash Bros. Games at all, then you would know of the Pokemon Goldeen. It's supposed to be one of those pie-in-your-face moments. You throw a Pokeball and you get literally a useless Pokemon. Well, what would be the useless assist in this regard? And I think Grandpa Lou just sleeping on a chair in the middle of this battle, snoring away, would be pretty hilarious. And come on, who would be really angry about seeing this happen? Would you be really upset if you got Grandpa Lou snoring in the middle of the stage? I mean, okay, maybe in the 100th battle, on the edge of a one-on-one battle, you're both on your last life and it's 100% and you get an assist and it's Grandpa Lou snoring. You would be a little annoyed by that, but I mean, give the guy a break. He's 76 years old. He can't just be doing everything at all times.
I rented you boys some movies. Reptar Come Home, Reptar Redux, and my personal favorite, Lonely Space Vixen. That's for after you go to bed.
When you think of quick levels from Rugrats, anything involving the living room with the playpen is just going to be an iconic look for any level. But honestly, I'm going to go with a Java lava level. It's going to be a left field choice here, but I honestly couldn't fit in any other all grown up references other than maybe throwing a character in as an assist. But the Java lava as a level would make sense. It would give the opportunity for other all grown up characters to show up in the restaurant at various times. Maybe sometimes when you fight on it, it's just Tommy and Chucky. Maybe other times it's Stu and Dill. And other times it's all the characters. I don't know. You could program it however you want. The next show we are covering is, of course, the classic Ren and Stimpy show, also premiering on August 11th, 1991, created by John Kay. This is another iconic Nicktoon, one that has impressively remained culturally relevant since its premiere. Man, Nickelodeon with their first lineup of Nicktoons, because think about it, they start off with Doug, this very light show, very timid, very appropriate, family friendly. And then you get Rugrats with sometimes these, little gross out moments or things that would be slightly immature, talking about the potty, being naked. And then you get the Ren and Stimpy show, and it's just like the Hail Mary pass of just what you could pass off as children's entertainment. It has obviously remained just as impressive today as it has in 1991. Now, while I was a fan of the Ren and Stimpy show, I was an even bigger fan as a kid of their video games, specifically Stimpy's invention for the Sega Genesis. If you've never played this game, as a single player, you take control of either Ren or Stimpy, and you can switch between the two by pausing the game, and then there was just a little option between which character you were going to play as. While you were, let's say, Ren, you would use Stimpy as a wide variety of weapons and items, including a projectile, a way to get up to higher places, a way to smash down on the ground, a way to dig in the ground, a way to attack other characters. If you watch the footage I'm probably showing you right about now, you will see that from both characters, now both Ren and Stimpy were already seen on the leaked cover art for All-Star Brawl and are probably separate characters, both of which could work as their own fighters. And you could pull from a wide variety of references from the show that could create very different movesets for each of these. But for my game, I am pulling as a single character, an Ice Climbers type character with Ren and Stimpy. And there have been many characters in the Smash Bros. Series that have the ability to switch between multiple characters, and you could do the same here, switching between controlling Ren or Stimpy. Controlling either or would bring up different fighting options using the other as a weapon, pretty much referencing most of the moves from that game, but I really feel like that could be adapted into a pretty cool character. Other than Ren and Stimpy, the other character I am still keeping is the already announced Powdered Toast Man. Powdered Toast Man, as far as I can tell, is the very first animated Nickelodeon superhero that exists. I believe his commercials on the Ren and Stimpy show aired before Quailman did on Doug, so I could be wrong about that. Quailman could have edged out Powdered Toast Man because of Ren and Stimpy's terrible schedule. Either way, this is a very early on Nickelodeon superhero that is a mascot in the Ren and Stimpy universe, but also his powers are real, and playing the video games, he shows up as a superhero. So as a fighter, he's going to make an incredible choice, and it's going to be interesting to see just how well he plays in the new game. I am fine with keeping him here because I just want to see every Nickelodeon superhero duke it out. As far as assists go for the Ren and Stimpy show, there are a bunch of side characters that you could pull from. A bunch that I'm not sure Nickelodeon would even want to be promoting anymore. Characters that they even haven't used in any promotional material in decades. Characters like Mr. Horse or Muddy Mudskipper or even the Fire Chief seem like obvious assist characters, but if I could just pick one character from the Ren and Stimpy show to have as an assist, I would be happy seeing Sven Hoek, Ren's cousin from the Season 2 episode of the same name, Sven Hoek. It is my favorite Ren and Stimpy episode. It perfectly, to me, encapsulates everything that is great about the show. You get to see how stupid Stimpy is to a completely gross degree. You get to see how angry Ren can get, and you get to see a ton of the gross-out humor that the show is known for. Sven as a character is pretty much Stimpy from Ren's lineage, and as an assist, I'm either picturing him as some sort of Wobbuffet type effect, or he's just throwing cat litter all around the stage. Maybe people are running into it, or maybe he's covering the screen with it, just like I mentioned Phil Nil doing with Mud earlier. I didn't really get into any Ren and Stimpy levels. Of course, making levels based off of Space Madness and Fire Dogs are pretty obvious, like those iconic Ren and Stimpy moments you would want to feature. But I really like the stage they have in the new game where it's, I'm guessing, Powdered Toast Man stage, which is just, you're just fighting on the counter. Like, all the characters are shrunk down and fighting alongside the sink and a toaster and whatnot. I'm totally here for it. The Ren and Stimpy levels in video games usually can get really wacky and weird, so just, you gotta run with it as much as you can.
Hi, this is Private.
Next up, we're touching upon one of my personal favorite Nicktoons, Rocco's Modern Life. Created by Joe Murray, the show first premiered on September 18th, 1993. It's a show that appealed to me both as a child and as an adult, and is one that I hold to a high standard when it comes to these children's shows that also try to appeal to adults. Sometimes there's a level of sophistication when it comes to your adult jokes in children's shows. Rocco's Modern Life was sometimes subtle and sometimes not, and it's the sometimes not ones that make you go, how did this get past the censors, that make you fall in love with the show as an adult all over again.
30 bills? What a ripoff! I told you. Watch your step. No, you don't, bub. Get back in there.
And when it comes to fighters from the show, it's pretty obvious that Rocco himself would have to be a fighter. Rocco isn't a fighter at heart. He's a lover. He doesn't want to fight people. I imagine that his character model would just look a bit timid at all times, look a bit worried about punching and beating up people. Maybe he's looking away as he's doing some of these attacks, but there are so many moments from the show, so many items you can pull from as references, that you could get a pretty unique moveset out of Rocco, as you could with Heifer Wolf. Also being a bigger character, he would be a heavy set, a heavy character, your Bowser, your King K. Rool. His moveset, you could include belches and body slams and have a lot of fun with both of these characters. And because they're really cartoony and wacky, you could just have a blast animating them and stretch them out and do whatever you can. Give that Rocco's Modern Life feel to these characters. You could also have a ton of fun pulling some alternate costumes for these characters, including that time that they went to the gym, that time that they were at that wedding, the time they were trick-or-treating, and even the times that they were
completely naked with no clothes on.
Yeah, there's just, this show, if you've never watched Rocco's Modern Life, it's available on Paramount Plus. Find a streaming service of your choice. Buy the DVDs. They're still available on Amazon somewhere.
Don't step on the white ones. Hot lava. Pineapples.
I know that more recently a more updated complete series was re-released, so by all means, it is worth every single penny. If they're charging you $50 for this kind of humor, absolutely worth it. Filbert Turtle you could have as a fighter, but I kept thinking about this idea where he comes out and he just starts telling characters that he turns the page and he washes his hands. He turns the page and he washes his hands. And then he turns the page and then he washes his hands. and then he turns the page and washes his hands. And there's an aura around him where if any of these other characters get caught in this aura, they fall asleep listening to Filbert constantly tell them his process of reading comic books. The second I got that thought in my head, it just didn't come out, so he's an assist here in that regard. The big heads I would also have as an assist, although I'm not really sure what they would do. It would be funny if they just came out and were arguing with one another and that was just causing issues on the stage of some regard. In the same vein, it would also be funny to have the fatheads come out and start hitting people with their parking meters as they would in the show, and by all means, make all of the same sound effects and the music from the fatheads play out, including the announcer. Like, all of that is hilarious and is still funny to this day.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet the boneheads.
It's the fatheads, you dolt!
So the fatheads would have to be referenced in this game. And finally, credit where credit is due, this was brought up by my friend Alex when we were kind of going over my fighting roster. He brought up the idea of an assist where you would throw it and a television comes out that just has the jar of mayonnaise on it from that Wacky Deli episode. And I absolutely love that episode. It's one of my favorite episodes of Rocco's Modern Life. I love the mayo jar skit. I love when Nicktoons Network supposedly had a lost episode of Rocco's Modern Life and just aired the mayo jar for like 22 minutes plus commercials. Or I believe it aired 30 minutes uninterrupted, but I taped that whole thing on my old DVR setup. And that is funny. So here's another Goldine-like character for us, or Goldine-like moment where you just see the mayo jar. If you don't want to use it as an assist, I think Wacky Deli as a level that changes, like you're fighting on the TV screen and it's changing from the mayo jar to the deli to the meatloaf being smushed, that would be really funny and definitely fit in as a Rocco's Modern Life level. Other levels to bring up is, of course, Rocco's home. And by the way, look at that gorgeous background with the sun depleting. Rocco's home looks as beautiful at dusk as it does during the day. If you do a level where they're fighting in the street, I think it would be fun to have other characters driving cars and have them possibly hit other players, and you have to dodge traffic a little bit like they do in the net stages in the Super Smash Bros. Series. You could also have other characters referenced in this way of walking on the sidewalk, Gordon the Foot, really big man, maybe flying through the sky, but maybe also have a day and night cycle. Have it slowly shift from day to night while you're fighting on it. Rocco's Modern Life, among many shows, uses a very gorgeous color palette for its backgrounds, and I feel like adapting that in the stage would be a very cool homage and also visual for the game. Of course, we also have to have a Choky Chicken as a backdrop. Now that they are fully organic, non-GMO, free-range, vegan, it is a Choky Chicken of the future. It would be nice if sometimes you'd pick that stage and you'd get the fat Choky Chicken, because that's the classic Choky Chicken. That's the Choky Chicken I would visit if I was in O-Town.
How dare you!
Next up, although I had trouble making a logo for this series, I do think that a character from the Secret World of Alex Mack deserves to be in this game. What character you may add? Well, let's just get this out of the way. Obviously, Alex Mack. Now, if you're not familiar with this show, don't worry. That's what I'm here for. The Secret World of Alex Mack, created by Thomas W. Lynch and Ken Littman, first premiered on October 8th, 1994, a part of the SNCC lineup, the Saturday night Nick lineup of shows that were more aimed towards an older Nickelodeon audience. And these shows were actually really good for their time, so I would definitely look up the overall SNCC lineups they had throughout the years and go back and look at all of those shows, because most of them were really quality. The show features young Alex Mack getting caught up in a chemical spill and receiving psychic powers, the ability of telekinesis, the ability to shoot little bits of electricity out of her fingers, and the ability to turn into a puddle of water and to, move around as that puddle. Now, of course, I'm sure by her design and the fact that I'm mentioning psychic powers, you know exactly where I'm going with this. Ness and Lucas from the Super Smash Bros. Series are young kids who have psychic powers, and also at least one of them likes to adorn a baseball cap, and I think they have a somewhat similar style and clothing. Alex Mack could be a wonderful addition to the game in terms of getting another female on the roster, someone who is really powerful and could duke it out with the other Nickelodeon characters. Next up, we have Ah Real Monsters, another creation out of the Klasky Chupo animation factory, this time created by Garber Chupo himself alongside Peter Gaffney. The show first premiered on October 29th, 1994, and is definitely one of the more darker Nicktoons, certainly in both design and content. This show, for a lot of parents, was just gross from the very first look. I mean, look at these monsters. They're adorably sweet, and at the same time, they're a bit grotesque in some ways, mainly Crumb. I mean, I think Crumb upset more parents than Oblina and Ickis combined, because anytime you bring up Ah Real Monsters, if there's somebody in the room who didn't like it, they usually bring up Crumb as the main reason. Not anything about his character at all. It simply is design. I go on to talk highly about Crumb as a character, that he's one of the best characters in the show, but his design just as a monster just bothers some people, and you know what? In that regard, job well done, my friend. Now, I could just combine the three of these characters and make their moveset based off of some of their video game appearances, especially their titular video game back on the Super Nintendo and Super Genesis. But Oblina was already announced as a single character, and I don't want to take that away from her. So in this regard, Ickis, Oblina, and Crumb are all separately their own characters, and all of them are wildly different monsters that'll have wildly different movesets. Now, as far as assists go from this series, the Gromble is the most obvious choice. I would love to hear those high heels stomping around on the stage, either using his pointer as a weapon, or he just whips out his projector screen, and if it hits any of the characters, boom, you're flying away. I honestly think the Gromble would also work as a Mr. Rossetti type character, just coming out screaming at people, just audibly just screaming, being an annoyance. I mean,
how hard could it be to scare the pants off an 8-year-old? This was all you came up with?
I'm sure that Greg Berger would have no problem coming back voicing the Gromble, yelling at other Nickelodeon characters, but I would also love to see the return of Jim Belushi as Simon the Monster Hunter. Simon the Monster Hunter is the overall antagonist of the series, constantly trying to uncover the monster world. He is well aware of their activities and what they're doing, but just doesn't have enough evidence of them to bring his findings and his thoughts to the world. He's one of my favorite Nickelodeon villains, and I would love to see him in some regard here, even if you're pulling from any multitude of weapons that he uses or traps from the series in terms of trapping characters for a few seconds. Now, that logo should look familiar, and if it doesn't look familiar, well, it's the logo for All That. All That was a kids sketch comedy show that made its debut all the way back on April 16th, 1994. Two of the original stars of All That are our next two fighters, Keenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell. Now, the two actors gelled so well on All That, it was so obvious, that they eventually spun off into their own sitcom known as Keenan and Kel that debuted on August 17th, 1996. Only a year later, on July 25th, 1997, would they also star in a feature-length movie named Good Burger, based off of the most successful sketch from All That. I pictured that these two characters would have movesets that can pull from both All That, Keenan and Kel, and even Good Burger the movie. Some of their costumes can simply be of clothing that they've worn in promotional material for the Keenan and Kel show, or at least giving Keenan a Rigby's uniform.
Have you noticed anything strange about him lately? Who loves orange soda? Kel loves orange soda. Is it true? Is it true? Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, it's true. Ooh. I do. Ooh.
Nope, no stranger than usual.
You could also pull from a wide variety of their All That characters, such as Super Dude, Repairman, Pierre Escargot,
Wish to live here say burrito spicy. May I slap you with my spicy burrito?
Coach Cretan.
You know what? I'm getting up and I'm getting up. I said I'm going up there. I said I'm going up there.
Lester Oaks construction worker, Lump Maroon, and of course, Ed and Dexter from Good Burger.
Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. Can I take your order?
As far as levels go, of course having a level based off of Good Burger in some way would make sense, even if you're not going to reference anything else out of all that. Keenan and Kel likewise. If you could just have a Good Burger level, that would be solid. Other than that, I would love to see a level based off of Rigby's. For some reason, it's one of my favorite set pieces from Nickelodeon. It's comforting. I don't know why this random bodega has just attracted me over the years. I can't explain it other than I just absolutely love Rigby's. So if I can also ask for a Rigby's level, even if you're not putting any other content in, I would be a happy camper. Next up, celebrating his 25th anniversary this year, we are covering Hey Arnold. Created by Craig Bartlett, this first premiered on October 7th, 1996. Spongebob Squarepants may be my personal favorite Nicktoon, but I hold Hey Arnold in a higher regard. I actually hold Hey Arnold in the highest regard when it comes to children's animation. Or at least animation that was meant for children but could also be appreciated by adults. The perfect analogy for me is that if the Peanuts are classical music, Hey Arnold is jazz. Which, if you're a fan of the show, should seem pretty obvious as to why I said that. Now, of course, dealing with a show called Hey Arnold, the obvious choice of a first character to have as a fighter would be Arnold himself. And then the secondary character would, for some, be Helga, but for most would also be Gerald. In what may be a controversial move with an easy remedy, I have made it so that Arnold and Gerald are taking up the same slot. They have the same exact moveset. They have very similar body types, although their heads are completely different. But I'm sure with some clever wiring, the head won't really matter as much of the rest of the body will. Their moveset could use a wide variety of weapons from the show, like baseball bats and other sports items. You could pull references from specific episodes, things like that, and their costumes would align in so many ways, as I'll show you in a second. Easy remedy here is if this is upsetting to you that I did this, and even at the end you're like, I still don't agree with that, hey, take one character that you don't like on my roster and make Gerald a separate character. He is somebody that in my eyes would be an echo fighter in this regard, someone who has a similar moveset but would be different in some statistic ways behind the scenes. Of course, Helga G. Pataki, the S-tier character, was already announced for Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and she fits right in my roster as well. But I have one more character from Hey Arnold I want to give a slot in this roster, and if you don't like this character, by all means, take them out and give that spot to Gerald. But I am adding in Grandpa Steely Phil. This man deserves a spot. We need some elderly representation on this roster, and my goodness, he punched out Hitler once. Now, if you're a Hey Arnold fan and you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, why Grandpa? Why not Grandma? She is superior in all ways for this kind of combat, and for that I say, no one can control Grandma. She is a free spirit. No one has the ability to control Grandma, and no one should. As mentioned before about Arnold and Gerald's costumes lining up perfectly, here they are wearing matching suits in the Hey Arnold movie, here they are in their disco gear at the dance, and we would have to throw in the fruit costumes as an option, because somebody has to take those banana shoes to the face.
Hey, how far does this bus go anyway?
What difference does it make? When it gets to the end of the line, we'll just ride it back again. The journey is the destination, man.
What's that mean?
I'm not sure. I heard in a hippie movie.
Helga could, of course, adorn her Jungle Movie attire, as well as Arnold and Gerald. She could also doll herself up like she did in that one episode on her date. She could also don her iconic pink pajamas and pummel a Nick characters into the ground. And let's not forget the ultimate Helga, this Helga. If you pick this Helga, I'm immediately taking the L. By the way, as far as Grandpa's other clothing options, I don't think you need to go much further than this bow tie and this leather jacket. I mean, come on, people. This is a character you're going to want to main in a fighting game, especially when he's wearing that jacket. Now, as to the discussion on Grandma, as mentioned before, she is a character you can't control, but as far as my ideal position for her as an assist, she would be a mixed bag. she would be a character that could come out in a wide variety of ways. Maybe she comes out as a karate master and starts karate chopping people into oblivion. Or maybe she comes out dressed in her jungle attire and starts hitting people with a fly swatter. Or she could just simply come out and sing the Star-Spangled Banner.
Happy 4th of July, everybody!
And just be completely useless and not get in the way of any of the fights. Grandma is a wild card. Beyond Grandma, I think Ernie Potts coming out with his wrecking ball, causing havoc on the stage would be fun, as well as Mr. Quinn coming out, singing his classic song, The Simple Things.
You can offer me a diamond-plated pearl. You can send me all the riches in the world.
Could you imagine just Mr. Wynn on a little stage, on a little platform with his guitar, dolled up in his country attire, singing The Simple Things with the camera just slowly zooming in on him, just as it does with the concert assist trophies in the Super Smash Bros. Series? I mean, I'm there all day. You could sing the entire song, and I would be totally fine with that. Who would really complain if you had to hear Mr. Wynn at least a few times every time you played? Of course, we can't forget the sheer amount of kids that are on Hey Arnold, the other classmates of Arnold, Gerald, and Helga. Any one of them you could make an assist, and honestly, you could make an entire Smash Brothers style fighting game out of the Hey Arnold universe. But the one I chose to pick out of the group would be Harold. He's the original bully. He's one that has a lot of episodes centered on him. He grows a lot as a character throughout the series. He eventually becomes a really lovable friend of Arnold. And I just think in this game, and honestly, he just gets to come out and let loose and pummel other characters to the ground. He is a character that, hey, maybe could take a licking or two if Arnold or Gerald are out there taking some punches. Maybe you get to punch Harold. And I honestly, while making this, did not plan for Harold to just be staring at the stack of pancakes that Grandma is making on the screen in front of you. But I am so glad it ended up that way because it is on point with the character. As far as stages go, the boarding house is as iconic as you can get when it comes to Hey Arnold. If you look at the trailers of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, you'll notice that the Loud House level features some windows that are open and other Loud House characters showing up in those windows. I think something similar to that here would be pretty smart, to have other boarding house members and maybe other Hey Arnold characters just show up in the background. Maybe Stoop Kid is chasing somebody on the street. Maybe Stoop Kid is just chasing somebody down the street. You could have different seasons at the boarding house. You could have different moments, different characters. There's so much to pull from. You could do a similar level in front of PS 118, or even just having a traveling level around the town. I also think having a level based off of Hey Arnold the Jungle Movie would be really smart. It was a big release. It was a big return for Hey Arnold to television. Honoring that in a level would be a really cool way to show off. Even just using the 3D effects they did in the special to show off the temple and whatnot. Having that as a background while you're just fighting on traveling platforms, that happens all the time in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Don't see why it can't happen here either. Next up, we have The Angry Beavers. Created by Mitch Shower, this show first premiered on April 19th, 1997. And I just put together the whole, April showers, bring May flowers thing with this. Mitch Shower's show premiered in April. Is that a coincidence or what? I don't know. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, you probably made another duo team, another tag team, Ice Climbers-like team between the Beaver brothers of Norbert and Daggett, using their beaver prowess to dominate the competition. Well, sorry to say, but you're wrong about that. I did combine the characters, and they're not just alternate costumes of one another, although they are. I have chosen specific moments from the show, but for my roster, I specifically chose the Beaver's alternate egos, Muscular Beaver and Barren Bad Beaver. Now, for some context, Muscular Beaver is Daggett's alter ego, his superhero alter ego that he likes to dress up as and play pretend that he's a powerful superhero and has fun with it.
And that was the day Dag the loser died.
And Muscular Beaver was truly born.
Eventually down the line, Norbert gets really annoyed with Daggett's Muscular Beaver character and creates Barren Bad Beaver to give Daggett a run for his money as a super powerful super villain. I think it would be really fun here to create a moveset with the Beavers dressed as these characters. And look, any of the previous ideas I mentioned are on the table, either putting the Beavers together in a tag team or just having normal Daggett and Norbert as selectable characters that have the same move set. As separate characters, hey, if you want to erase another character off my roster, once again, that option is always on the table, but I just love the idea of Daggett dressing up as Muscular Beaver to fight the other Nickelodeon characters. It's on brand for the character. As far as assists go, I don't think you could go much further than just having Barry come out with a concert performance of his song Baby, and you just have the screen do all the same kind of warping effects that happens in the music video. That's it. So it's not just your normal concert assist, it's also a distracting screen effect that'll happen at the same time. So you're getting a bit of a twofer here with Barry. And just like many of the other shows I've mentioned, I love the idea of getting some of these iconic buildings in the background. It's an easy way to showcase other characters from the show, so you can have other characters in the windows of the dam, or coming out of the water, or in the background of the forest. You could do anything like that. I also think it would be fun to have a stage based off of the song Beaver Fever, just a nice disco arena that the Beavers have. Next up, we're tackling Cat Dog. Created by Peter Hanna, the show first premiered on April 4th, 1998, and is one of the most easily recognizable Nicktoons that exists. It's an easily marketable character due to its name and simple design of just being Cat Dog. And of course, I have them as a fighter here. Now, I've used Cat Dog a few times in the other Super Brawl games, and he is usually a pretty fun fighter to use, but I am especially excited to see how they implement Cat Dog in All-Star Brawl. I imagine there's just going to be a lot of stretchiness, and if you really go really balls to the wall with this character, you could pull out an incredible fighter at a Cat Dog that would be incredibly unique, something where there's just, you get that bouncy stretchiness effect that you can only get with Cat Dog. I hope they go in that regard in some way, shape, or form.
That's the most beautiful bottom I've ever seen.
As far as assists from Cat Dog, you shouldn't look any further than the Greaser Dogs. All they need to do is come out and just start pummeling any of the characters they see. That's kind of their thing. They like beating people up. They like to beat up Cat Dog, and maybe if Cat Dog is one of the fighters, there's something special they say to that effect, but other than that, I think they're always just looking for a good fight, so the Greaser Dogs coming out would definitely be a good choice from Cat Dog. You also couldn't go wrong with other characters like Rancid Rabbit and Winslow popping up as assists, but I would honestly have them as background characters as a part of a Cat Dog stage. Once again, showing off an iconic building in the background, maybe a day-to-night cycle, but it would be an easy way to show off more characters in the background, and you can even just use 2D animations for these characters. You don't have to show 3D models of any of these characters in the background. Next up, we're tackling the Wild Thornberries, yet another massive hit out of the Klasky Chupo Animation Factory. This time, this show was created by Arlene Klasky, Gabar Chupo, Steve Pepoon, David Silverman, and Steven Sustarsik. Now, the obvious choice from this show is, of course, Nigel Thornberry. He is one of the most marketable Nicktoons of the 90s Nicktoons lineup. I see him on more merchandise than I do Eliza, Donnie, Darwin, Marianne, and Debbie combined. Nigel is just a beloved Nicktoon. He's probably the most beloved adult Nicktoon there is. But Nigel as a fighter was a great choice to show off in the first trailer. It really shows how wacky they're willing to go with some of these character choices. As far as the second character goes, I originally for the longest time had Eliza penciled in as a fighter and just Darwin, Donnie, Marianne, and Debbie used as an assist and level backgrounds in some way, shape, or form. And that was it, and I left it like that and called it a day. But I just felt bad because all of these characters really are main characters of this show. Although Eliza is the main character and deserves to be a fighter, the other characters are always there in some regard. One of the days that I was kind of looking over the Super Smash Bros. Roster, my eyes fixated on the Pokemon Trainer. Alright, so if you're not familiar with the Pokemon Trainer, you're not actually controlling the Pokemon Trainer themselves. You're controlling one of three Pokemon, Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard. Each one is different in their own way. While Charizard may be able to bring the most power, Squirtle is the fastest of the three. Now, I wasn't necessarily looking to adapt this kind of character in this game unless it was specifically going to work in some regard. And when I thought about this next idea, it was just one of those ones I was stuck with, and any person I spoke to about it agreed that it did work as a concept. So this is how the second Wild Thornberry's character works. You start out with Eliza Thornberry. She'll have the most balanced numbers of the 3 characters. Who are the other ones? Well, if you don't want to play as Eliza anymore, you could switch over to Darwin, who's going to be a bit slower but also have a heavier punch to bring. And even though he is a chimpanzee and can be fast, Darwin is usually a bit more lethargic, and I think it would just fit him to be a little bit more reserved in his full-on movement and just be a powerhouse on the field. But if you don't want to play as Darwin, you can then pull out Donnie, who is going to be the fastest of the 3, won't have as much of an attack as the other 2 characters, but you could certainly build quite the energetic moveset out of Donnie as a character. He is almost a wild card himself. Now, this idea may not gel with what you would do with these characters, and that's perfectly fine. As I've mentioned many times, simply delete and add in. But for my roster, these 3 are sharing one slot together and are sticking with one another through these fighting circumstances. You may be asking yourself, why did I choose Donnie's shorts as the representation logo of the entire Wild Thornberry series? To me, other than Nigel Thornberry's face, it just seemed like the most iconic thing that when you see those shorts, you know it's the Wild Thornberries. Now, being that Marianne has a very high understanding of camera work, I believe that her assist in some regard would be similar to Yuri Kozukata, a character from the Fatal Frame series, who is an assist trophy in the Super Smash Bros. Series and also utilizes a camera as an attack in some regards. Giving Marianne that kind of power, I'm all here for it. I'm sure no one else would really complain about that. As far as Debbie goes, I thought about Debbie being a bit lethargic would just work for her as a background for the Wild Thornberries level. Just her lounging in front of the Humvee as it's just sitting there in the savannah. But then I thought about her using the Humvee and how she just likes joyriding with it. So in the same regard that Captain from the Animal Crossing series comes to pick you up in his bus, I imagine that Debbie maybe comes by to pick up other characters in the Humvee and it drives off of the screen. As far as a level itself, look, any stylized location that looks like you could do Antarctica, you could do Africa, you could do Europe, you could, as long as you have just a wide open space, the jungle, an open plain, maybe the Humvee in the background and maybe it drives by or other animals or whatnot. It's going to give that Wild Thornberries vibe, as long as you just give off the vibe of the planet Earth. In what might be a shock surprise character, your eyes are not deceiving you. That is the logo for the Nickelodeon show Cousin Skeeter, created by Phil Bowman, Alonzo Brown, and Brian Robbins. This show first premiered on September 1st, 1998, and yes, I am adding in Cousin Skeeter as a fighter. Now, there aren't many puppet characters we can pull from Nickelodeon's lineage. We do have the Mr. Meaty characters of Josh and Parker, that at one point I had penciled in as fighters, but spoiler warning, I took them out, alongside Rex from Victorious, that I almost had as a fighter at one point, simply to have this puppet faction of Skeeter, Rex, Josh, and Parker, the puppets against the cartoons. I don't know, something about that was intriguing. Skeeter overall was just the best character out of that bunch that I would want as a fighter. You could model a character in the game to not only look like Skeeter perfectly, but I'm sure you could add a texture to make his skin look a little bit more like felt so that it actually looks like a puppet fighting on the field. Hey, look, I don't know about you, but there's 74 characters to fill up here, and the Super Smash Bros. Series has a well-documented history of using very weird, eccentric characters that Masahiro Sakurai just pulls out of left field and says, boom, I made this a character. I just feel like Skeeter has that same energy in this regard as a Nickelodeon character. Next up, we are heading below the ocean, down to Bikini Bottom, and landing to the world of Spongebob Squarepants. Created by Steven Hillenburg, the show first premiered on May 1st, 1999, and yes, SpongeBob is a 90's cartoon. I hate that sometimes these 90's Nickelodeon framing of all the characters, they always leave out SpongeBob. I don't know if they just feel that SpongeBob gives off a later Nickelodeon vibe and they just want to go as early as possible, but sometimes they include characters from Rocket Power, which premiered after SpongeBob, so that doesn't make sense. Include SpongeBob in the 90s Nickelodeon lineup. Stop excluding him simply because he's still on the air. Now, of course, we were already shown 3 SpongeBob characters in the first trailer of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and I agree with all 3 choices. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy. All 3 of them can have completely different movesets, devoid of any similar characteristics, and you could pull from not only the show, but the lineage of the video games too, which they seem to be doing. Look at Patrick's moveset. He's pulling moves from not only the TV show, deep cut references, but he's also pulling moves from Battle for Bikini Bottom. So it's not at all crazy that you could build 3 completely different movesets out of these characters, and they are going to remain the same in my roster as well. On top of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy, I decided to give myself 2 other options. First of which was Mermaid Man, and I decided to go with the classic version of Mermaid Man. I want him at his fighting best when he dukes it out against Powdered Toast Man and any other superheroes I decide to add in. Now, of course, you could also add in Old Man Mermaid Man, and if you would rather have that, I'm completely fine with that option as well. For my tastes, I'm going to go with the classic Mermaid Man to get as best of a fighter as we could, but hey, if you'd prefer Old Man Mermaid Man, then I'm fine with that. On top of Mermaid Man, I'm going with Man Ray. He is a classic Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy villain. He's probably the most classic, and he is so beloved between SpongeBob fans. And his debut episode, which I covered a few weeks ago on my podcast, I'm Ready, a SpongeBob Squarecast, he is a classic SpongeBob character, and you could easily create a really fun moveset for Man Ray.
That makes sense to me.
Then take it.
It's not my wallet.
Oh, you dimwit! Take back your wallet or I'll rip your arms off!
I'm not only a sucker for the superheroes, but I am a sucker for supervillains and even the show's overall villains as well. Plankton in some sort of robotic suit would fit as a character here. Something about Man Ray being the juxtaposition to Mermaid Man just made sense to be able to let you duke them out between the 2 of them on a varying degree of levels. Now, I would have no problem taking days out of my life, diving through the lineage of SpongeBob SquarePants, finding the 8 best costumes for SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, and finding alternate colors for Mermaid Man and Man Ray that would reference other characters of the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy universe. That could be its own video. I'm not going to do that here. But what I will say is I do like Patrick's shirt of the Patrick Star Show. I don't know what to think of the show yet, really. But man, just getting the shirt in there with the purple pants, I'd be totally fine with that as just a reference to that show. Now, as far as assists from SpongeBob SquarePants go, Squidward would make the ideal Goldine type assist to just come out and do nothing, to just be a Squidward and just do the bare minimum. Maybe he smacks people around once in a while if you get close to him. I don't know. You can have a lot of fun with Squidward. You could even have him come out and just do interpretive dancing, and if anyone gets in his way, he throws him a punch. I would also have Mr. Krabs come out in some regard. Maybe he's chasing his first dime, and anyone who gets in his way just gets pummeled. He could just pop out and throw out some extra Krabby Patties for health. You could also have Pearl come out and do her cheerleading routine as she did in Culture Shock, which causes the entire stage to shake and all the characters to get thrown off in various ways. Did also mention Plankton as an assist as well, but there is so much from SpongeBob you can pull in this regard that, like I said, it really deserves its own episode on its own down the line. So, once again, if that's something you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. Now, of course, as far as levels go for SpongeBob SquarePants, you could use literally any background from that show as part of your level design. It's going to be iconic. Outside the Krusty Krab, inside the Krusty Krab, inside or outside of SpongeBob's house, the whole street of Conch Street with all 3 homes. You could do so much, and we've already seen a few levels of SpongeBob SquarePants of the upcoming game, and it looks like they're already having fun with it. Next up, they are riders on a mission. We are talking about Rocket Power. Once again, created by Arlene Klasky and Gabar Chupo from the Klasky Chupo factory. They were just pumping out animation throughout the 90s, left and right. Rocket Power was their answer to the growing fascination with extreme sports in our culture. Thanks in part due to Tony Hawk and the popularity of his video game series, the world of skateboarding and overall extreme sports started opening up to more eyes of the general public. Especially when it comes to a professional level, people started looking at skateboarding less as a hobby and a pastime and more as something that one could be competitive at. But in the world of Rocket Power, we're not just covering skateboarding, we're covering rollerblading, we're covering surfing, street hockey, snowboarding, skiing, everything that you can think of that would be deemed cool for a kid in the late 90s. You bet that the kids on Rocket Power were doing it. If you liked scooters, you can bet your sweet bippy that you would see scooters in an upcoming season. What I'm saying is there is such a wide variety of different sports that you can choose from to make fighters based off of the characters of Rocket Power. But today I am bringing you two. The first of these characters being made up of Otto and Twister. Now, both of these guys have very similar body types, so right off the bat I already knew that their movesets would be very similar to one another, and I figured that while they might use skateboarding and hockey in their movesets, Sam and Reggie could use a computer laptop to smack people around instead of having a skateboard. So then therefore, Sam and Reggie could share a moveset. Now, Sam and Reggie definitely have different body types, and this might not gel with people. I'm just thinking about a very simple model between the two, sharing a somewhat similar moveset just would be an easy way to get these characters together, because it would be weird to have Otto and Twister as a part of one moveset, give Reggie her own, and then give Sam his own. I mean, it could work in that regard. Go ahead. Just remove one of my other characters and fit that in. I figured that between the two fighters, you could evenly distribute all of the different extreme sports covered on Rocket Power. Otto and Twister may use skateboards where Reggie and Sam use rollerblades, and just vice versa. Just split between the two all of the different extreme sports on the show. If you're looking for an assist, you don't need to look any further than the Rocket's father, Raymundo, and his best friend Tito from the Shore Shack. Now, originally I had these guys more as peaceful characters, but then I just kept looking at this GIF and just seeing these two coming in on a massive wave, knocking out the other characters. Tito and Raymundo just having a great time as they're coming by. Maybe Tito talking about the ancient Hawaiians or something. Now, the Shore Shack, of course, makes a wonderful backdrop for a level of Rocket Power, but in some way, I think this level should spin or turn, because just in this one setting, if you just turn the camera, you can then see Madtown Skate Park. You can then see the beach with the ocean. You can see the pier with the carnival rides. There's more to see, so I would like to almost zoom out of this a bit to see more of the level. If they want to just keep it locked in some way, if we could at least get a shot of the Shore Shack and Madtown Skate Park with some kids skating, obviously other characters from the Rocket Power universe, including Conroy, that would be absolutely ideal in my opinion.
We got the sun, we got the surf, we got chicken wings, we got
sand in the potato salad. Go home and trash your own beach, kids. They got sand in the potato salad.
I see you guys are making friends too.
They got sand in the potato salad.
And that is it for my 90s characters as far as the fighters go. Now, just a quick reminder, I do have other 90s characters as assists and even other 90s shows as levels that I'm not going to mention in this video, but I'm going to keep at the end of the series. I want those choices to be big surprises at the end of this series, because I really went left field with some of my ideas, and if you are a diehard Nickelodeon fan, I am sure you will love some of the choices I picked for extra assists and levels. Once again, if you like seeing this kind of content, the best way to see more of it is to let me know below that you would like to see more, and please share with me your ideas on how this roster is going so far. What other 90s Nickelodeon characters would you like to see as fighters? Do you have any guesses as far as other characters you think that may be in my roster in the 2000s or the 2010s? Let me know in the comments below. Please subscribe, hit the bell button, and thank you for coming aboard. It's time to set sail. This is Captain Eric, signing off.
Yeah.